Today on Insider Investing, I'm hosting Ayush Jaiswal, CEO and founder of Pesto Tech, which is on a mission to empower the developer community. We cover a lot of ground in this conversation: his personal journey as a young founder, the story of Pesto, what the tech crash means for developers, and much more. Let's listen in. Hey Ayush, welcome to Insider Investing. You have the distinction of being the youngest guest we have had so far. So we're very excited for this conversation. How are you doing
Doing
today?
well, surviving the apocalypse, and thanks for inviting me here.
Ayush, one of the most interesting things when you were like going over background is that, a lot of people, when they're unhappy with being forced to attend
Mhm.
college, they rebel in different ways, etc. You instead started up when somebody told you that you need to maintain 75% attendance. And through the journey of starting up, I think as a young person, you obviously faced a lot of initial failure when you had your initial set of startups. And then to have the motivation of yet again doing something afresh, how do you muster that kind of energy and motivation to do
Yeah,
it?
I think these things look really good looking backwards. But if I really when I'm talking to folks who are in similar situation, I just ask them what are the choices you have, right?
Yeah.
So, right now we think about choices and what's motivating me, what's doing this and that, and we can look at it from that perspective. But at that time, it was basically, do or die. Like, I went to college and that there was like a path for me. Um, I said like this is not the path I want to take, so I basically have one path left, right? So I'm either gonna do something or it's not like you have a choice, is all I'm saying.
Right. So you're sort of reacting to the situation as it
Yeah.
goes at that point of time. But how are you feeling at that point? Like you quit college, you tried to start up, some of the initial things didn't work out. Was there a sense of like distress at a point
Yeah.
where you thought that maybe I should go back to studying
No,
again?
100% massive. I think you always question yourself, right? Because I think 99% of people are going to tell you that this is the wrong decision, right? Like every single person I talked to said no, this is not the right path, and you are probably, being too early in making those decisions, so on and so forth. And then I met one person who basically said that it looks like you want some answer from me, right? And because, I think you want that answer from me, that is the right answer for you because that's what you want to do, right? That's what will make you happy and take your chance. And I basically realized that okay, I was really looking for that one person to say yes. That means for me, decision was to really jump into it because I think I was very impatient at that point, and I've always been a builder, so I always liked building things, and I just couldn't digest this fact that for 4 years I'm gonna learn in a very slow manner and do random things and, and things of that nature. So that really made me uncomfortable. So I think it was like a pretty straightforward decision for me. The curriculum didn't make sense for me at least in the direction I wanted to move, and I thought let me try this out and go on this journey. And yeah, it was totally very tough. I think yeah, I sometimes like prefer not to go back to those memories. It's quite depressing, not as fancy. Looking backward, it all like looks nice, and you talk about your struggle stories in which like you overcome them, but there are a lot of people who don't overcome them and face a hard time. So yeah,
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think in hindsight, a lot of this gets
yeah,
gilded, right? It becomes
absolutely,
romanticized that struggle,
yeah,
etc. And the success rates are very low,
absolutely, yeah,
as we know. So I think it's about what you want to put yourself through, and do you even want to go through that? And for a lot of people, it probably doesn't work out. One of the most interesting things about Pesto for me is that somebody as young as you being able to access the set of angels that you did, right? In my experience, starting up Dezerv, we had the privilege of knowing these guys for a very long time. I was in wealth management for the last 16, 17 years. It was very easy to access some of these. Whereas for you, probably it was not as direct and simple,
Yeah.
right? You had to figure out, or maybe serendipity
Yeah.
happened. So what exactly went down, and how did you manage to sort of get these marquee names on your cap
I
table?
think like over the years, I've always believed in things which compound, right? Like everything, right from like the way we are building Pesto, what we want to do in Pesto, and also in my personal life, I think I've always done things from a very, very long-term perspective and wanted to do things which compound. So I think like very early in my
Hmm.
life, I got attracted to this community called Startup Grind, and the whole philosophy. I've learned a ton from Derek, who was the founder of Startup Grind. Now he's building another company called Bevy. But he had been a great mentor, and the whole philosophy was always give first, right? Figure out how you can add value to different people. And I think I
Hmm.
always had that mindset that I just want to be giving more and more, right? Like, and I would work like 15, 18 hours a day
Hmm.
consistently over the years, focus totally on giving, right? How can I add value to
Hmm.
more and more people and constantly look for, more opportunities to do so. And I think after doing it for 3 to 5 years, it just all compounded, right? Like, and if you really think about it, right, the startup community is a very, very small community. So if you've been around for 4 or 5 years and you're
It
trying to
is.
do
Yeah.
like, legitimate things, trying to add value, trying to help people, or, sort of do whatever you are doing, I think it compounds really quickly, more quickly than you think.
I that's an
Yeah,
interesting insight. Actually, a lot of folks probably don't realize enough the value of compounding. It applies in everything we do in life, in
yeah,
relationships, in work, and definitely when it comes to investing also. And this whole early journey, I think that you've been through is really a testimony to that, because from outside in, it would seem that, oh, Ayush started up and he got these set of early angels and then he raised from Matrix. It seemed like, a set of like things that just fell into place at the right time. But it probably wasn't as simple and direct, and many years of work before that. How did the Andrew conversation happen? How did you guys end up meeting, deciding to
yeah,
collaborate? He was heading tech for
yeah,
Gary. How did that
yeah.
change come
So I think
about?
like random again, serendipity. I think I was just like working in a co-working space randomly, and I meet this random guy. We become friends, and I took him to Varanasi, and we decided to collaborate on something. So it was a completely random thing, but again, it all comes down to serendipity, right? Like you miss 100% of opportunities you don't take. So I think the whole thing which I was just
Mhm.
talking about, constantly looking for ways to add value and things of that nature, just like opens up a lot of
Yeah.
sort of ways for you to collaborate. So yeah, it was interesting. I think Andrew like moved
Yeah.
on from Besto, I think a year and a half back. But yeah, I think it was like
Yeah.
a really amazing journey to kind of like be on within early days for sure.
But so much of this being in the right place at the right time is by design, right? In many ways, like, and you don't know when that right place, right time moment will happen. And sometimes just showing up for things, I think, is very, very important. Like, especially, from the place I come from in wealth management, right? How
Yeah,
do you build relationships with people? You just have to every day show up, sometimes get, turned around from their office and nobody will open the door and those kind of things happen. But in just consistently keeping doing that, I think is very, very
yeah,
interesting. Uh, uh, just switching gears a little bit now into Pesto,
yeah.
Ayush, and you were champions of remote work even before it was hot during COVID, right? In how did you sort of come to the insight that organizations or corporations are willing to let high quality talent work from anywhere? Because it was not again as clear to everybody as it is
Yeah.
now. How did that talk us through the journey of Pesto and how
Yeah.
did that come about?
So I think like it was, quite simple. I basically met people who were making $200, $250 an hour, right? And I was like, that's what people make in a month, right?
Wow.
Sometimes, like, on
Yeah.
average. And I was like, this is
Yeah.
crazy, right? Like, once I went to SF, right, I took like a one-way flight. This was for a startup grind conference in February, global conference, and there I was, looking to make money, right? Like I'm a young guy who's pretty bankrupt and trying to hustle, right? So you would, of course, look for consulting opportunities. And I had been like a developer in early days, right?
Correct.
So I would really look at those opportunities and find really good opportunities in SF, found people who were making just so much more. And in that conference itself, this is, I guess, like Startup Grind conference, global conference of 2016 or 17, I guess. Um, I attended this. It was more like a lecture
Mm-hmm.
than a session by Balaji Srinivasan, and
Discussion. Yeah.
he's also like one of our angels. But I met him. He was founder of Earn.com at that time, and the lecture was based on how do you build a great culture in a remote team. So I was like, what the hell is a remote team? Like, forget about
Mm.
culture. How do you function remotely, right? Like, is that like a company without a building?
Correct.
That's funny, right? So I went on to attend that lecture, and Balaji is brilliant. Like he's phenomenal in the way he kind of like shares his thoughts and stuff like that. And that session really got me. Like it was an hour session, and I sort of caught up with him, sort of talked more about like how things work at Earn and things of that nature, whatever I could gather. And I asked him a bunch of other companies which he knows are working remotely, right? And he gave me like a few names. And I basically, so that was the starting point, right? That I saw that, okay, remote work is a thing. There's this company which is working remotely, which is very large, and let me dig deeper into it. And what I got most excited about was I was constantly thinking about an internship. Can I get an internship in which I, make like whatever good
Mm.
amount of money, but once I go back to India, can I continue doing that,
Correct.
right? So I found that there were other companies like GitLab, like Zapier, like Balsamic, like Doist. All these companies have been working
Mm.
remotely since last 10, 12 years, right? So clearly, remote work is not happening in 2020, right? It happened a while back. And all these companies
Correct.
were enjoying the
Yeah.
benefits. They could get access to top talent, much competitive prices. The prices were not
Mm-hmm.
inflated because of demand supply mismatch and things of that nature, right? And I basically
Mm-hmm.
decided that on my trip, I'm just going to interview a lot of founders or employees at those companies, and I started pinging all their employees, VPs, etc., trying to understand more about remote work. How did they function? What did they do? How are their companies organized and things of that nature, right?
Mm-hmm.
And after doing like 25, 30 interviews of all these people, I realized that every company which was working remote knew what they were talking about, right? They were just so well organized, right? So much better organized than the other companies that I had met. And I basically built my conviction in remote work at that point after doing that research, and I was like, remote work is the future. Of course, like I did not expect it to happen in 2020 or 2021. I was prepared for remote work to take another 10 years to, get into the mainstream companies. Um, but yeah, I think I had
Yeah.
like my conviction that, okay, remote work is going to happen. I'm going to exist in that market and my opportunity will come, right? So that's what really got me into remote work.
But Ayush, tell me this. I think very interesting point that you made about, and especially the topic of Balaji's session, right? How do you manage culture in a remote work company?
Yeah.
We get the fact that one, that you get access to better talent because you can access talent from anywhere. I get the fact that it is more cost effective, even in terms of like getting the right talent from maybe another place where the cost economics are different, but also the fact that you don't have all these overheads
Yep.
which we need to do. But what's your advice to your clients or companies that are doing this for the
Mhm.
first time? And what are the cultural shifts that they need to make when it comes to dealing with remote work? Because at the end of the day, every engineer is also a
Absolutely.
human being, right? They also,
Yeah.
I'm assuming at some point, crave interaction, right? They crave human interaction. How do you solve for that, therefore, for the
I mean,
engineer and for the company? Because the cost economics are very
yeah,
clear and apparent.
absolutely. I mean, I'm not sure how many engineers crave as much interaction. I think like they do crave interaction, but maybe not as much as others, like as business people. Like we thrive on interactions. Like, I love meeting people.
Fair
I
point.
love building relationships,
Right.
right? But developers would be like, I love meeting you like once a week, maybe. But give me more clarity about what my job is, and I'll get things done, right? Like, and I like working in my zone. And I'm not saying like engineers are not extroverts. There are some of those as well, but like I feel like if you're organized, it's like a trade-off, right? Like there will always be people who would love going to offices, and we have also seen that pattern. There are a lot of people who like doing that, but there are others who basically tend to stay close to
Yeah.
their families. Like think about people who had to immigrate from India, Africa, or Europe to US just to do their job and stay away from their families, stay away from their home, and all
Yeah.
of that, right? So I think these are trade-offs, right? Like if you basically can sort of learn how to
Correct.
work remote, learn asynchronous communication, documentation, and things of that nature, and how to stay organized. That's the most important thing in any remote company. I think you get the other benefits,
Mm-hmm.
which are also equally important. So yeah, it's definitely a trade-off. And as long as culture is concerned, I think there's like one of the most important things is clarity. Like every single person having clarity about what they need to do to work every single day, and how does that roll into the org's objectives. I think that is, I would say, like single most important thing in any remote team, right? So once people have that, then they can like push for building relationships, doing offsites. I think a couple of offsites a year is like incredibly important in teams which are remote. Once at least, that
Yeah.
people get to know each other at a personal level. But
That's
yeah, I think those are important things.
No, that's interesting, and one of the things that we have also, to be honest, been wrestling with because a part of our team, especially product design, some of the marketing, some of those folks prefer to come into work because they want to collaborate,
Yeah,
engage, whiteboard, all of
yeah,
that stuff. And then there is the engineering and design teams which prefer to sort of work
yeah,
remotely because they want to be in their own zone
yeah,
and be able to deliver high quality work without
yeah,
distraction, right? And obviously, I'm generalizing because there are exceptions. There are folks who, even within those teams, who like to hang out with people and then they prefer to
yeah,
come in. I think that the challenge for us, and maybe I can get some free advice on this call, on
yeah,
this conversation, is that how do we manage this hybrid nature of things, right? Because
yeah,
it's no longer remote or
yeah,
work from office. It's
absolutely.
a sort of sense of hybrid
Yeah,
where you enable everything to
yeah,
coexist, right?
absolutely. And I think like so here's what I would say, like what people really get confused with, right? So when we say remote work, we are actually thinking about three different things here, right? So one is remote work, in which you can basically work from anywhere, right? Like if you want to catch up, if there is a team in Delhi or Mumbai, you guys can like catch up and work from office like a couple of days a week, or work from a cafe, or get together every once in a while and things of that nature, right? The second one is work from home, right? Work from home is a
Yeah.
totally different thing. These are people who just prefer to work from their home, and I think I've seen a lot of developers who adopt that and prefer that, having a workstation set up at home and just like working
Hmm.
from there permanently, right? The third one, which people very
Yeah.
often mix with remote work or work from home, is work from pandemic. Work from pandemic is not remote work, right?
Yeah.
Working from your home, not having the ability
Correct.
to meet people, to go out, to co-work with your colleagues and things of that nature, that just is not going to scale because, forget about work. That's just not going to scale because it's just not good for your mental health, right? So you obviously are not going to enjoy that. So I think these three things people tend to mix, and I think if you just look at it from freedom perspective, right? Like one of Pesto's mission is to give people freedom of space, right? And when we say freedom of space, we don't mean that we want you to work from your home,
Mm-hmm.
right? Freedom of space basically means that you can work from anywhere, right? And of course,
Yeah.
like the whole narrative of working from beaches is a scam, right? Like nobody's working from beaches. If you're working from,
Yeah,
Goa, you're
it
not
doesn't
working. Like stop lying to yourself. Unless, of course, you have a whole setup
happen.
in Goa, but yeah, I think yeah, having like freedom of space is
No, it's
different
hard.
from the rest of things. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And I think that's a good way of articulating it. You call it freedom of space as opposed to where, like, whether it's remote work or work from office, the fact that you should be able to work from wherever
Yeah,
you choose to and wherever you're productive from. Like, I think that's very,
absolutely.
very important. Ayush, one of the most interesting things about the Pesto model was the fact that you were very different from the rest of the edtech world in the way you monetized, right? The fact that you chose to take a percentage of compensation, and it's in a sense it's backing yourself or the kind of value
Absolutely.
that Pesto is delivering, because you are saying that I'm saying you believe that the value that you've added will compensate the engineer, but also
Absolutely.
yourself. How did that economic model come about? And it's very, very
Yeah, so
rare.
honestly, I would say it's not rare at all, right? So I'll give you some examples, right? So I kind of like set out on this mission with like very simple perspective that how do we bring very, very high quality education to our developers and at the same time help them get freedom of space, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think from that perspective, if you really think about it, how do you bring that change in education, right? That change will only come when I, as an
Mm-hmm.
education institution, am incentivized, right? When students succeed, and not just me, like not just the company. I promise you, every single person throughout the company, right? Right from our sales guys to our people to our mentors, everybody is incentivized to make sure that our developers end up, incredibly successful and not just immediately after the program, but from a longer term perspective, right? So we have never said Pesto is a 3 or 6 months program, right? Even though we
Mm-hmm.
have a couple of programs which are for 6 months, we always say that this is a 6 months onboarding to a lifelong community where everybody is cheerleading for you, right? Because we have vested interests, right? So I think that was the simple thought process. And in the beginning, we said that, hey, look, we are going to do this for free for you, right? We won't charge you anything, right? That is the amount of confidence we
Mm-hmm.
have that we will really make
Mm-hmm.
this work. And we started teaching developers for free. And once people really got jobs, then we monetize, right? And slowly we are going to move to a model in which we basically start monetizing from companies, right? Because we have this confidence that our developers are so good, any company would want to pay for it, right? So if you really look at it from that
Mm-hmm.
perspective, I think it really works out. And I also feel that in order to have the ability to provide high quality education, it's just like harder to scale just the education bit of it, right? Like if you're running an ed tech company and you're making money only from the fee, it's hard to bring that quality of education because imagine like you're paying colleges much more and you're not getting any ROI from there. And
Yeah.
when people think of
Yeah.
edtech, they're like, oh, 1.5 lakhs, 2 lakhs, that's so expensive, right? But what did you pay your college? You paid like 10, 15
Yeah.
lakhs to your college without getting any ROI, right? So I think people are little, sort of not
Yeah.
friendly enough towards paying edtech firms, and understandably so because it's something new. So I think that's why it was extremely important to monetize the demand side, because you're just creating value, and everybody would want
Mm-hmm.
to pay for that.
No, that's amazing, Ayush. But if you think about the education systems of the future, do you think that a lot of high quality colleges can also move to that? Because one of the things that colleges are monetizing is essentially the brand.
Yes.
They're placing that brand on your
Yeah.
CV, in a sense, being rewarded
Yeah.
for that,
Yeah.
right? And surprisingly and sadly, so they are not even investing in brand
Yeah.
anymore, right? Forget the quality of
Yeah.
delivery, but there's not enough investment in brand. So it's that it's declining in many
Absolutely.
ways. do you think that there is a time now for colleges or educational institutions to do this sort of a revenue
Yeah.
share thing? And if so, are you
I
already
mean,
seeing
of
it?
course, like, so I think like when I was doing some research about income sharing agreements, I basically realized that Yale University, for example, tried doing this like, decades back, like I think back in 1980s or something like that, right? And they have been doing like running some programs, right? Um, I still don't believe that education institutions will be able to innovate as quickly because by design they're not incentivized to do so, right? I'll explain how.
Mhm.
Um, all these, edtech, not edtech, but all these large colleges have a brand associated with them. Their capacity is very low, right? They are expensive. Like if you graduate from, and this is actually one of the worst things. Actually, I spent some time in Silicon Valley last year, right? And I was living in this house which had like a bunch of Stanford grads, right? And they're all like 23, 24-year olds, and I realized that when they graduate from Stanford, they're graduating with a 200, $300,000 debt, right? Imagine that at the time when you should
Yeah,
be taking most risk in your life, you have like 2 to 300K debt to start with. That's
yeah,
terrible, right? For you to like have that debt. Not saying that, like it's not worth it. Of course, like you get value because the brand is there, a lot of network effects and things of that nature. And if you have money, please spend it. Like, nothing against them. But I am only
yeah.
trying to say that Stanford will always have capacity for so many people because buildings don't scale, and they will always have a selection bias because
Hmm.
of which the people which they have are going to be analytically better, right? Because there is clear, sort of um, selection bias there at the beginning. So I think they will continue to exist for some time, but I think there's this big white space in between in which there were a bunch of other
Hmm.
institutes which did not have a brand, and they were just like largely giving you a degree, and I think like those degrees will become meaningless much sooner than we expect, and they won't be able to innovate as quickly because of one simple reason that their educators are people from academics and they're not people from the industry. And I think it's just really hard to stay up to date in tech if you have people teaching who are not from the industry, right? And also because buildings don't scale, of course. It's just really hard.
And obviously also the talent issue, right? The same challenge there, that the best quality
Yeah,
teaching talent is not concentrated in one
yeah,
location. So I think the distribution of talent on that side potentially will also enable ed tech. And for me, like as a father of two kids, moving away from the brand construct to more construct, I think that is a transition that even parents have to make. Because it's not easy, it's not intuitive, right? The first question, like somebody asks you when you say that you have two kids, they'll ask you which
yeah,
school do they go to, and that's almost like figuring out which brand
yeah,
should they associate
yeah,
your kids with,
absolutely.
right? I think that will require a bit of a change till the time folks like you guys, and we can say that no,
Yeah.
my child doesn't go to
Yeah.
college, they study on Pesto. So I think there
Yeah.
there is that
So,
distance.
I mean,
Uh,
there are going to be
uh,
two things here, right? Like, one will be that you're going to, I mean, before I get into that, I feel like the whole Chota Beam education is going to still exist. Like, we will have a lot of kids going to schools and things of that nature because there's a lot of social aspects in which kids need to grow, right? And uh, it's just
yeah.
incredibly hard to teach people in like an online environment, right? So I think like a lot of companies which are more working towards making them sharper with respect to analytical skills via games and things of that nature will be very exciting. But I think after that, when it comes to higher education, I
Mhm.
think there'll be players like those who are basically taking kids who are like developers who are going for their degrees, and instead of 4 years you can have like a 2-year thing in which they really become really good engineers, and you can deliver them the basics, right? And then I feel like there will be these companies who will exist on top of it, right? Like think about engineers who are working at different companies right? An engineer at Amazon or an engineer at sort of some larger companies, right? Who they've been working for like 5 years, right? Now in 5 years, tech itself changed, right? Like,
Mhm.
there are newer things coming up. It's harder to keep up with things, and like as a developer, you're constantly learning, but can you learn fast enough, right? So I think there'll be these education companies who will basically help developers who are already developers to keep up pace with the market, right? And then that will help
Mhm.
them, have like a stable growth in their careers. So I think these are like some kinds of companies which I feel like are exciting to look at in next 10 years, which will create like some significant value.
Yeah. No, I think to my mind, EdTech is probably the biggest business there can ever be because there are so many layers, and especially with longer lifespans and technology changing fast, the need for upskilling will be much, much more acutely
Absolutely.
felt than it ever
Yes.
was. Yeah, going back 10, 15 years, what you learned in
Uh,
college, you can sort of pull through with that till a point you get to a managerial position. But now in our lifetimes, we are already seeing shifts happening very
yeah,
fast, right? I mean, uh, even 5 years ago, the understanding of Web3 was just not there. And today it's almost going to become integral to every industry in many ways. And how do you upskill
exactly.
so
Yeah,
quickly that you're able to benefit from it?
absolutely. Just join
Yeah.
Pesto.
Yeah.
Like
So I
it's
think
so good.
absolutely.
Like, just kidding.
I was waiting for the plug, Ayush.
No, I
So,
seriously feel like,
no, but
it's especially with believe me, like I've seen this, and I'm like more excited about how we can really take this to more people. But I think I have seen people, friends, and companies in the US just hiring like developers for 150, 200K, 250K, just because like the demand for this limited pool is very high, right? So think about it, like yes, they create a lot of value, and there's a lot of value which is happening. But I think like there is this delta which comes in because of demand supply mismatch, right? So I'm against this delta, right? Like, why don't you just hire people who
Mhm.
are whatever, like
Yeah.
70, 90, 100K, but working from Africa, India, Europe, etc. And they're just so good, like so I think like from that perspective, I like very highly recommend Pesto as a friend to my friends, just because they can get like a lot of value from it, right? And I feel like, Pesto is just one player in the market. I'm sure like there are a lot of people who are going to come up, but I'm very bullish on this market as a whole, and I feel like there is insane amount of value, which will get unlocked in the next 5 years or so.
No, absolutely. I believe that too. Uh, Ayush, we are in a time of intense change, right? I mean, who would have thought 2 years ago you would see such intense digital adoption happening so suddenly,
Yeah,
right? And today, in a sense, when world is trying to go back to uh, not exactly pre-pandemic, but sort of a mix between pre-pandemic, you're seeing declining adoption. If you look at a little bit of like order values are shrinking, the number of orders on e-commerce are reducing, etc. So some of those trends are playing out, and as a result of this, you've also seen a significant correction in tech stocks across the world. We're seeing 60 to 80% drops in large companies which are listed in the US. We're also now, for the first time, beginning to see massive amount of layoffs, which is the sort of huge hiring jump that had happened. And now a little bit of that cool off is happening. How are you seeing this, and also like sort of positioning your students for this? That what is there, do they have to accept now lower compensations, or do you feel that for high quality talent still there has not been enough change?
no, I think like we have always said this, and this is not just now, but like 5 months ago, 3 months ago, I've been writing letters, been updating people to really,
Hmm.
keep their heads calm, right? Like I know that the opportunity is there, but like, people were going for really quick, changes in their jobs. Their expectations were bloated and things of that nature, just because there was like too much demand. So I think like this correction is extremely healthy, and I think people who were always fundamentally driven and were focused on like business fundamentals and values, it's affecting them a lot less. But I think the bubbly nature of the market is gone, and that's great, right? Like I mean, we love that. And with respect to developers, I think developers. like people who know where they are, and good developers often know that, right? They know the value which they create, right? And I think they're less monetarily driven. We have most, sort of often seen this more from like junior developers who are trying to start out and really find a position in the market. And honestly, like everybody wants to grow in their careers, right? So I think the market was just rewarding, last 1 year or so, which has, got some correction, which is very healthy. But I think moving forward, or even in the current state, I think great developers are, very much in demand. They will always be because the world just needs a lot more developers, right? And if I particularly have to talk about India, I feel the opportunity is going to arrive again, in next few years. Because if you really look at the macros, people have now realized that, okay, going to India to open a dev, office is not a cost-cutting objective. It's not a cost-cutting exercise, right? The days of outsourcing is gone. And now you're coming to India because that's where developers are. I think like
Yeah.
some 24-25% of world's developers, right? And we make a lot of babies and we make them all do
Yeah.
engineering, right? Like so I guess that number is only going to increase with time. So yeah, I think like there are, I
Yeah.
guess like the stat I had was there are more than 600 large companies which are trying to open up offices now in India, and this time they're coming not for cost cutting reasons, but they're coming because that's where good developers are, right? So I think from like the market perspective, correction is great and it's very healthy to have. But for developers who are focused on, doing high quality work, it's just not going to affect them as much.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is something that we try and do in our interviews is that try and assess for how much impact that the developer
Yeah,
wants to make, right? And you almost realize that in the first 5, 7 minutes of the
absolutely.
conversation. I see the best developers actually ask a lot of
Yes.
business
Yeah.
questions. That what is the company doing? Who is the user? What are you solving for? How are
Yeah.
you different? And I get really excited when an engineer asks us
Yeah.
that. The second thing, which I hope that more engineers do see value in, is the value of equity, right? Is the value of ownership, ESOPs, etc. And I think on that side, there's some bit of education, counseling yet to happen,
Absolutely.
because and to be honest, like we can't blame them because in our lifetimes, not everyone has seen that kind of value creation happen, which probably happened in the valley over the last 15, 20 years. So you're only hearing from secondary stories. You're not hearing from your own network. I wish there was more sort of being done to educate them around
Yeah.
ESOPs. So we are doing some work
That's
around
amazing.
that. But is are those some of the things that you guys also cover?
Absolutely. So in fact, like very recently, we decided to create like an entire, so we do a lot of soft skills for people and really help them understand the business aspects. And that is the whole philosophy behind Pesto, right? Like we basically make product engineers and we have like a 360-degree developer concept in which we basically want that apart from engineering, people should also know concepts of design, product, and business as well, right? So we do like actual lectures on all these three things. And I think from that perspective, we like every single developer, for example, once they graduate from Pesto, makes their own designs. They build a product, they design it by themselves on Figma, right? They don't have to be a designer. They can suck at design, right? But knowing how Figma works, functions, gives them,
Yeah.
like makes them empathetic towards their colleagues, right? And similarly, they design their own PRDs and stuff like
Correct.
that. So, they will have better empathy with their engineering managers, so on and so forth. But I think during the program, we decided that we should be educating
Mm-hmm.
people about ESOPs, not just the value that the wealth they can create, but also the nuances, right? And I feel that this is missing not just, from like developers' perspective, but also like in general, I feel like we need to educate people a lot more about equity. And because like early on in your career, that's how you can generate wealth, right? From a longer term perspective. And it is, of
Absolutely.
course, like a lot more common because, like liquidity has been there for a long time in the Valley. And now it's coming to Indian market as well. The number of IPOs we had last year was crazy. So yeah, I'm sure like a lot more people will get to know about these things.
Yeah, absolutely. So we run this community called the ESOP
Oh,
Dream,
nice.
and the kind of questions that we get
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on Telegram and it's very active. A lot of the questions are now
Nice.
asked and answered
People
by
itself.
other members, so the admins actually don't have to step in
Nice.
that much. But I think there's a long way to
Absolutely.
go, and if we can all truly realize the value of ESOPs, I think the wealth creation opportunity
It's
in
huge, yeah.
India is huge.
Absolutely.
Uh, Ayush,
Yeah.
I'll bring this back to what I started with, which is about yourself. How is Ayush the developer different from Ayush the founder? Because you've also come a long way in your own journey of running Pesto. How would you think your thought processes have changed, or haven't they?
Of course, like it changed massively. I think every year is like the Ayush of last year was so stupid. Like, why did he do that? Right? Like, and I think that's great, right? Like, I've always been a fan of compounding and le these learnings, right? So I think like back in the day when we would start out, you would really be fearless, right? Like, I think I've always seen that side of me, right? That okay, whatever it is, we'll figure it out. Let's get it done. I would try to move too fast and things of that nature. But I think with time, I've realized that. Innovating and building a product which people want and things of that nature is one thing, right? Building a great product is one thing, but learning how to build a company
Yeah.
is another thing, right? And both are equally important, right?
Yeah.
Equally, sort of because of both like coming together, you end up building a company which becomes large and sustains with time as well. But these two things are very different. And then like the tech side of
Correct.
things is, of course, like very different. But I think like that's what I've learned with time that learning how to build an org, thinking about things like, how do you create the right org chart? How do you push the culture, the right culture in the team? How do you align their objectives and things of that nature? Being a first-time founder, a lot of these things were like new to me, right? Like, and I also did not understand the importance of these things. And I think over the years, picking it up slowly, uh, I think you get that maturity as a founder. So I think yeah, I would really over-index on all these things. If I have to give this advice to a younger Ayush, any person who comes to me for advice, I tell the same thing, that don't be in a rush. Like try to understand, reduce the unknown unknowns that you have first, and then decide what you want to do first, right? So I think that's
Correct.
yeah, flying in with too many unknown unknowns is asking for trouble.
Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely, Ayush. This was an exciting
Yeah,
conversation. We are cheering for Ayush, the founder, the developer, and for Pesto for the mission that you guys are on. We are super excited. Thanks for being on this. Really enjoyed this.
absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me. And next time, maybe I have so many questions about I had about you as well, but we'll get to know each other better at some point, I guess. But yeah, lovely.
We'll talk more about investing.
Yes,
Yeah, we'll talk more about investing next time. Really enjoyed it. Thanks, Ayush.
absolutely. Thank you so much for hosting me. Lovely being here. Take care.
We hope you found the insights from this show useful. You can subscribe to the show on your favorite podcasting platform. Also, follow the YouTube channel of Dezerv for more insights on personal finance and investing.